Hi guys, it's Maigan Lynn here from MaiganLynnArt.com, and this is the second tutorial in my three-part series about how I specifically do my process. As far as the first tutorial was about mixing my glue all or Mod Podge pouring medium. The second tutorial here, I'm going to show you how to mix the paint mixes that I end up with. And then the third video is going to be using these paints that I mix here to show you how I do my galaxy pours, because my galaxy pours tend to be some of my more popular pieces. They're very moody, very bright colored, a little bit far out there, and very cool. So I'll show you how to do that after as well. So in the previous tutorial, I showed you how to mix. This is the Mod Podge pouring medium mix that I do. Just a quick recap, it's 2/3 Mod Podge or glue all, Elmer's glue all, which is this stuff right here, with 1/3 water. So I put 2/3 of the glue in here, 1/3 water, shake it up like crazy. Some people need to let it sit so there's not air bubbles in it. I guess they let it sit for about 24 hours. I don't prefer to do that because I really like the air bubbles. I also use a torch to help lift the air bubbles on my paintings from the bottom, so I don't end up with too many unknown factors. But I do find that the air bubbles tend to add a lot of texture as well, so I like them. I leave them. The other things that we're going to be using today, I'll show you as I go along which paints I'm choosing, which paint colors and which paint brands that I'm choosing to use. I use these plastic cups. I use the clear ones because I like to be able to see when I mix my paints how much paint versus how much pouring medium I need to mix. So the clear cups I find really helpful. I have two different bottles of silicone here. This is the one, this is Obanoff's Water Shield. I think that's, yeah, Obanoff's Water Shield. I had to find the information on this one online because it's not really helpful on the back, and neither was the listing on Amazon when I bought it. But it's 16% silicone instead of 100% silicone. I think it's around 16 to 18. It's just silicone and water, so the concentration is a lot less. It's still effective. It just doesn't give you quite as many or as big of cells. Which some people, I don't know, you can totally use it for different variations if that's what you're going for. I keep it on hand. I haven't gone back to it yet just because I've been experimenting with so many other things, but I do enjoy especially the smaller cells. I find they're really intricate and interesting, almost lacy. This one is the 100% treadmill belt lubricant. That's all it is silicone. I've been using this one most often. I find I get the biggest and most quantity of cells using this product. So, and then I have my trusty stir stick. So this is just water, because even though I mix my glue pouring medium, depending on what paint brands I use, it will require a little bit more water, or just to make the consistency what it should be. I will use any brand of acrylic paint under the sun. I can probably get it to work the way I want. I'm not saying that to brag, but it's just, I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. They try and use the same exact method or concoction for every single paint, and it doesn't necessarily work like that. Every single brand of paint is going to have their own makeup, so you kind of have to work with them accordingly. I do it based on feel. I know a lot of people, there's people out there that weigh their paints so they know exactly how much of what to put in there, that kind of thing. That was a little too intense for what I was going for. I just really wanted to play with the paints and the pouring and just get my hands in there, figure it out, get dirty. So that's essentially what I did. So we're gonna start this off. I'll mix my base paints. And for the galaxy pours, my base is black. I mean, for the night sky, I think that seems fairly obvious. So this is the Artist Loft Flow Acrylic paint, which is thin enough, but I still mix it with my pouring medium. Now it's gonna, and I mix a fair bit of it because when I do my paintings, I don't just sit and do one. I usually end up doing something like 6 at a time. So I set everything up all at once and then I don't have to worry about going back to it. Okay, so this, even now, this has a nice little spout. I mentioned in my previous video, the tutorial about the pouring medium, that my dad used to use these to make gravy for Thanksgiving dinner. And now I just find it funny that I'm using it for glue and pouring mediums. Okay, so it's the same kind of recipe for the pouring medium as it was for, as it is for the paint mixes. So for the pouring medium, it was 2/3 glue to 1/3 water. For the paint mixes, now it's 2/3 paint to 1/3 of the pouring medium mix. Okay, so this stuff, I find the black and the white are a little bit thicker than some of their other paints, even though it is the flow paints. So you mix it in until everything's gone. Mix it really, really well. Okay, and then you test it. See, that's way too thick still. So I'm gonna pour in some more of my pouring medium. And usually when I'm doing my videos, you can go back and see some of my other videos. I generally skip past this part because, as you can see, the actual pouring is kind of monotonous and it's not very interesting. I mean, it is tutorial wise if you really want to, if you're trying to learn and trying to get the hang of it. I watched a lot of videos. See, that's a lot better. I'm still going to add a little bit of water to this. And I will say, I do like my paints on the thicker side. I find, see how I just added a couple drops there? I find that when I go to pour them on the canvas, they move really well, but they don't move so much that when I leave them overnight and come back, I have no paints left on the canvas. And I've heard so many people be devastated when they wake up the next morning and it's just not, it's not at all the way they left it. Okay, so this is pretty good for my black. Okay, so next we'll do the white. Always make sure that I'm prepared beforehand. I always make sure I have enough pouring medium made up. I say that and watch now, there's something that I probably forget and I'm going to embarrass myself. But that's fine. I'm not perfect. And that's the thing. You can do this so many ways. This is not the be all end all of paint mixing, pouring medium mixing. This is just the way I do it, and because I have gotten so many questions about my particular method, I have no problem sharing this information with other people, letting them know how I do it. Hopefully it helps somebody out there, because I know I said it as well in my previous video. When you're sorting through all of the videos on YouTube, it is a wild mess trying to find exactly what you're looking for sometimes. There are some really big names out there that have been doing this for a while, that have dedicated their channels to teaching, which is fabulous. Some of them I had a bit of a harder time following just because there was so much information and the videos were so long, and I found myself skipping parts that because I was impatient, that I shouldn't have been skipping probably. So when I first started doing my videos, I just wanted to show you how the process went. I didn't want to show you necessarily all of the mixing because, again, this is monotonous and not interesting. I just wanted to show everybody what it felt like, if that makes sense, because I do a lot of things based on feel. I find that's my better method of learning, is actually just feeling it out. So the white I always find is a little more tricky because it's pretty thick regardless of brand, so that's not bad. Runs off pretty good. We'll add a little bit more water. So usually what ends up happening is I plan out a few paintings to start with, specifically, like I'll plan out my colors and that kind of stuff, and then by the end, some of the paintings on my channels end up being paintings made with whatever's left over, because I absolutely refuse to waste anything if I can help it. Okay, so those ones were the Artist Loft. You can find these at Michael's. That's where I get almost all of my paints. And this is the Liquitex acrylic color, the basics. This one is the bright aqua green. Aqua, if you've ever noticed in my paintings, is one of my most favorite colors in the entire world. My whole art studio is aqua, and I've had, because we're a military family, we've moved a few different times now. I've had 3 different art rooms, and all 3 art rooms have had aqua blue walls. Okay, so I'm going to mix about that much. So one of the other things I also said in my previous video was there was some people will they'll pre-mix their paints a day early, so as not to end up with any air bubbles. So I don't know if you can see that. There's the paint, 2/3 paint, about 1/3 of the pouring medium. And again, you have to play with it. But anyways, they do their pouring medium or their paint mixes the night before, just so they can let them sit out for about 24 hours and let some of the air bubbles naturally disintegrate, come up from the bottom, and get rid of them so they don't end up with bubbles in their paintings. I like the bubbles. See, this one's a little bit more thick, so we're going to have to use a bit more pouring medium. And this one, it's pretty fluffy. I find the glue all mix and the Mod Podge mixes, they end up making the paints almost marshmallowy, which I think is pretty cool, to have a really runny marshmallow. One of the things when I was reading that kind of stuck out to me the most, I'm a very imaginative, illustrative type of person. I like when people tell me things that my brain can grasp onto, that it can see. So one of the things that really stuck with me when I was first learning how to do this was somebody had said your paint mixture should look like melted butter, like it should run off the stick like melted butter. So I've always kind of stuck with that and thought, I leave my paints a little thicker than most people do, so this is maybe a little unorthodox, because there is a very there's a sweet spot when it comes to paint mixes. Too thick and then it never dries, and then you get all kinds of issues regarding that, and too thin and it'll just literally run right off your canvas. It just won't stop moving. A little bit more water in this one. This one's tricky. I don't use the Liquitex basics as often. That's something that I'm just getting into. I've used a lot of the Artist Loft or the folk art, just different kinds. And I know that folk art's actually really expensive if you're doing a lot of poured paintings, because there's such small bottles for such a big price tag considering. But the colors that you can get are pretty amazing. So I'm just going to line these up here. Okay. The next one, I'll do this one next. This is one of my favorite colors, again, on the planet. I'm very excited about colors, you'll probably notice. This is another Flow Acrylic in the neon pink. I like these size bottles. They tend to last me forever. I have stockpiled in my pantry. I have an artist pantry. I've stockpiled a few of these size bottles in the white, the black, and this color in particular. If they made an aqua that was available at Michael's, I'd probably scoop that too. I'd probably have 10 cases of it, because I'm ridiculous with colors that I like. So this one, I find in the Galaxy pours, this really adds a lot of interest, having the neon pink. So I tend to use quite a bit of it if I can. And I find that mixing this one with the aqua and the purple, and then even a metallic, throw a metallic in there too, really pops. Like the pink really sets it off. Okay, let's try this. I added a little bit more. And if you over add your pouring medium, hopefully you have some paint to mix back in, because I think for me I might have just done a little bit too much, but you can correct it. See, this is what a lot of people's consistency would be like. It's very, very runny. I'm going to add more paint because for me that's too runny, and that's okay because I will use this paint. So now the only thing is when you add back in, it's a little bit more of a guesstimate as to how much. Again, based on feel. You really have to feel this stuff out. Some people are very specific, a little bit more accurate than I am, more scientific. They prefer numbers and exact equations, and my husband is the math person. I am not the math person. I like pretty fun science that you have to think about, but not too much. Okay, so I'm also going to throw in a couple of purples. I'm going to show you this one because this is an example. This is my most favorite purple. It's Majestic Purple by Acrylic, I guess you want to call it. It's a craft paint that I found at my local Dollar Tree. This is my go-to for purple. I love this paint. I think it's a little bit thinner than most other paints, but usually, like what I usually do is I just give it a shake, and a lot of people will tell you not to do this because it will cause air bubbles, but I give it a good shake. I'll show you the color of this purple because I just think it's so amazing. It makes disgusting sounds coming out, so you've been forewarned if you ever come across this paint. But I stop in and I stock up on this paint when I can find it because it's not always available. But look how pretty that is. I think that's so pretty. And look at it next to the pink and the aqua. They're perfect. And these stir sticks here too, again, I mentioned in the previous video, these are just crafters stir sticks. You can find them at Michael's, you can find them at Walmart. I bought these ones at Walmart. I think it was a box of 500 for $5 or $6 or something like that. It was really affordable. I'm going to add a little bit more paint back in there. And I know I mentioned the silicone, which I wait until all of my paints are done so I can keep track of which color has silicone in it already, because keeping track of that sometimes is interesting. Okay, so that's about the consistency that I'm looking for. Okay, so now I'm going to do a different purple. This one is, again, the Liquitex Acrylic Basics. This one's the Prism Violet. I also have the Dioxazine Purple, which is also another really pretty purple. It's a deeper purple. It's darker than the Majestic Purple that I really like. This. Okay, so when you're mixing your paint, just make sure that you get all the stuff off the sides. Now this is still way too thick. It's not even, look at that, it's not even dripping off. So I'll add some more in there. It's very fluffy. A little bit more. That's much better. At least now it's running, so I'll add a little bit of water in there as well. The Liquitex Basics are fairly thick. And you want to mix it really well. You got to give it a good mixing to make sure that all of the glue and all of the water hits all parts of the paint. Okay, so again, that might be thick for some people. That's perfect for me. Okay, and now I usually like to add in a metallic, not always, but sometimes. This stuff is my favorite. This is by Folk Art. This is the Aqua Flash Color Shift. So when you look at this paint, I don't know if you're going to be able to give it a shake first. Let's see. It shifts from like a pretty bluish color to an aqua color. There's a bubble in there. And it does the same thing when it dries on the painting, even though it's mixed with other paints. I love this. They have different colors in the Color Shift, but the Aqua Flash is my personal favorite. Not always easy to find. I've had a difficult time finding it at Michael's even. And yeah, again, these tubes make some interesting sounds. You'll notice if you ever come over and look at my art pantry, I have, I don't know, at any given time probably about 10 of these bottles just sitting upside down, because again, I don't like to waste, and the color is really pretty and the paints are expensive, so I want to use as much of them as humanly possible. So metallics are a little bit strange when mixing, because they have a different compound altogether than the regular paints, I find. They tend to be a little heavy, but when you mix them, it's funny because they do mix generally really well. See, this one is perfect, almost like that for me. Okay, so we'll leave those like that. So when I put silicone in the paint, I put silicone, a couple drops of silicone in every single paint color, except for the white and the black, or whatever you choose to be your base. I mostly work with white and black as my base because they are, excuse me, heavier paints. So yes, when you're mixing your paint into your flip cup, this is going to be the cup that you use to eventually flip onto your canvas. You start with the heaviest colors at the bottom, because when you flip them over, as they come down the cup, the heaviest colors will tend to sink through. The reason you don't put paint or silicone in your base colors is because as they're going through, you want the water in these base colors and the fact that they're heavy enough to weigh through to react with the other paint colors on their way down, which is what's going to help create your cells. So say we use black, for example, and then we put some aqua and purple and pink and whatever other color. The black's going to come down through all of those colors and react with the silicone in each of those colors, eventually sinking through them, lacing your cells with some black outlines. You're going to get different colors as they fall through each other. So that's why a lot of people do end up weighing their paints to find out when you layer them, which paint is going to be the heaviest, which ones should be layered in the cup first for better reaction results. I don't do that because I just like to play, and this is my method. Again, not a be-all, end-all of pouring mixes by any means. This is just the way that I found that I really like to do it. Okay, so some people spray their silicone in there. I'm going to use the 100% silicone oil, the treadmill belt lubricant. I don't spray because I find that makes it really difficult to determine how much is actually getting in there. So what I'll do is, because there's so much in here, I just let the drops fall right off the end here. So you put, depending on how much paint you have, you put 2 to 3 drops per paint mix. We'll go 3. 1, 2, 3. Whoop. 1, 2, 3. And 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I like the number 3, so we're just going to go with that. And then you don't, whatever you do, do not thoroughly mix these like crazy. You give it a little bit of a mix around. Okay, so once you have your silicone in there, don't whirl it around like crazy. Just give it a couple good turns, just enough to say that the silicone is kind of intertwined with the paint that's already in there. If you do it too much, I call it blowing out the silicone, because then it just doesn't react as well. You mix it too much in the paint.